Hi, I'm Meg. Welcome to Change Becomes You, the space where we explore the true power behind lasting change, your unconscious mind, the supercomputer within you, the part of you that creates healing, abundance, safety, clarity, and deeply meaningful relationships, often before your conscious mind even catches up. When I learned how to work with my unconscious mind instead of against it, everything changed. I moved from contract work as an organizer into building a multi-six-figure business from the ground up, guided not by force or hustle, but by alignment, intuition, and inner authority. Here's what I want you to know. You already have everything you need inside you. Nothing is missing. You don't need to become someone else. You need to understand how you're designed to operate. This podcast is your invitation to remember that. Let's begin. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Change Becomes You, the podcast. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a little while now, I hope you're starting to see that I have been writing them and presenting them in succession, kind of like peeling back the layers of what women are experiencing regularly, but we're not realizing it. So what I began talking about was why women stay stuck, if you remember. And then we explored why even after they begin healing, so many women, they quietly start to turn back. And not a lot of people talk about this. So the idea of the podcast is we get together once a month, and I want it to feel like this. I want it to feel like you and I just in a private space, having an intimate conversation. I want it to feel personal, intimate, vulnerable, and safe. So today, I want to explore something that happens after everything we've talked about for the last few months. Something that I find really surprises many of the women that I work with. And that's because eventually she starts healing. Right? Life begins to start settling for her, and she starts saying no to things in her life, and she starts creating healthier boundaries that we work on, and her nervous system starts to soften into her experience of life. And things don't feel quite so, I want to use the word chaotic. They don't feel so chaotic anymore. And that's when something kind of unexpected starts to happen. She starts to become uncomfortable, and that's what seems strange to her. It should feel more positive, not negative. But it's not happening because something's wrong, right? Because nothing's really wrong. She's healing. She's moving through her layers of old programming. And she's starting to understand how her nervous system has always been protecting her, even though it might look like sabotage, even though it might look like freeze. She's starting to understand her personal patterns and coping mechanisms and nervous system response. So as these start to shift and change, it becomes surprising that she becomes uncomfortable. And I want to ask you, have you ever experienced that in your life? And it looks something like this. I'll give you an example. You finally get an afternoon to yourself. You don't have appointments. You don't have any, crisis that you're managing or emergencies. No one's asking you for anything. The house is quiet. Your phone isn't pinging. Your emails are quiet, or you don't feel like you have to be glued to your computer. Right? Kind of everything you've been sort of working for and wishing for. It's quiet. You have some peace. You have some space. It's finally arrived. And yet instead of taking a deep breath, instead of curling up with that book that you've been meaning to actually read, instead of sitting outside with your cup of tea, your mind suddenly starts making lists. right? Or you start thinking, well, maybe I should take this time and clean the kitchen. I haven't washed the floor in a long time. Maybe I should clean the kitchen. You know what? This might be a good time to get back to those emails from a while ago that I never did answer, or sort through and shorten my emails. I forgot to return that phone call. I start thinking about dinner. Maybe I'll reorganize the pantry. Maybe I start to get ahead for tomorrow or for the week. I really should. I really ought to. And before you even realize what's happened, you're busy again. Have you ever done that? And it's not because anyone asked you to be, it's because something inside of you couldn't quite tolerate the quiet. Have you ever noticed that? Or maybe it's like this. You're sitting down to watch a movie. This is what I caught myself doing. You're sitting down to watch a movie, but before the opening scene has even finished, you've stood up 3 times. You remembered the laundry. You grabbed your phone. You made a cup of tea and then wiped down the whole kitchen counter. You checked your calendar for tomorrow. You answered a text. Then you come back and you sit down, and then you immediately remember something else. Maybe you're listening to this podcast right now doing some of those things. You're simultaneously folding the laundry, or you're answering your emails, or you're making dinner, or you're scrolling social media at the same time. And I want to say, if that's you, first of all, I'm smiling because I know you. I know me. And if you're doing this, I know you. Not personally, perhaps, but I know this pattern. And I hear it. I hear it every single week from one of my clients, undoubtedly. Women will laugh sometimes when they tell me these stories, right? They'll say things like, Meg, I just can't. I can't seem to relax. I can't seem to sit. I'm always doing something. I seem to be always on my phone. I even have a reminder on my phone that I have a 2-hour limit, and then it tells me I'm reaching my limit, but I can go in and change the limit and say, ignore it for today. I don't know why. Why is this happening? Why am I doing this? Right? I've been like this for a long time, but I wasn't always like this. And here's the thing. You haven't always been like that. You became like that. There's a difference. There's a big difference, because if something is learned, it can be unlearned. And there's a reason why we learned it. One of my clients is coming to mind right now, but for privacy reasons, I'm going to call her, let's call her Sarah. I'll make up a name. It's not a real name. I'll call her Sarah. And Sarah came to see me because she was burnt out. She was exhausted. Not just physically exhausted. She was that, but she was mentally exhausted. She was emotionally exhausted. And this is the kind of exhaustion where your body feels inflamed. Your joints hurt. Your body feels heavy before you've even gotten up and out of bed and starting your day. You feel it when you're walking up and down the stairs. There's this burn. There's this, I call it, you feel like you're dragging around this 100-year-old carcass. You're not recognizable to yourself. Your body's already aching. And she described herself as someone who was always on. Right? I'm always on. I'm always thinking. I'm always anticipating. I find myself always preparing for something, always planning. And she wasn't in crisis in her life. She wasn't dealing with anything catastrophic. Life was actually pretty good. And she had 2 children, has 2 children, and they're both grown. Her marriage was solid. And her work, she was relatively happy and going well. And she'd finally reached this time in her life, this season that she'd spent years hoping for. Like, not trying to rush through her life, but looking forward to when she got part of herself back, some freedom back, some peace, some quiet. And she couldn't enjoy it. She would wake up on a Saturday morning, she'd look around the house, and she'd immediately begin creating projects, whether that was closets or cupboards or spare room. There was always something, right? There was always something. And one afternoon, she sat across from me in our appointment, and she said something to me. She looked at me and she said, I honestly, I'm trying, Meg. I don't know how to relax anymore. I don't know how to not be busy. Not, I don't have time. Not, I don't get the chance to. There's always someone who needs me. She genuinely had that and didn't know how. Just imagine that for a minute. Imagine reaching a place in your life where peace is available and discovering you don't know what to do with it. It feels foreign to your nervous system. And there was another client that told me that she had booked herself a weekend away just for herself, right? Just a self-care weekend, a spa weekend. It was just her. She wasn't going with anyone. So she didn't even want to talk for the weekend. She had no responsibilities. She had no schedule. She had been dreaming about this for weeks when she booked it. And when she went, the very first morning she woke up and she went down for breakfast and she got herself a coffee. And she thought, I'm going to just take a plate of fruit and I'm going to go back up into my room and I'm going to sit on my balcony and I'm going to look out and I'm going to journal and I'm going to drink my coffee and I'm going to eat some fresh fruit and I'm just going to enjoy myself. And I have this beautiful view. And she said she lasted about 6 minutes. 6. Before she started checking emails on her phone. And then she started responding to emails, to clients, to colleagues. She started thinking about her grocery list for the next week. She went on and checked her banking and was thinking about the bill payment she was going to be doing. And here she is at this beautiful place for the weekend, and she can't relax. And it was frustrating and humorous all in the same moment. She was getting frustrated and she was trying to soothe herself by laughing, recognizing like there isn't any reason for me to be behaving this way when I'm in this beautiful place and I have all this time. And it kind of dawned on her like, I can't believe I'm doing this, right? I've escaped my life and now I'm just recreating the busyness, the demand, the shortage of time. So it's insightful, isn't it? We see our patterns hidden in plain sight, sometimes not so hidden when we remove everything else and we see how we behave. It's no longer, right? Because we often, where we go to is what needs to change. Where are the demands on me? So if I could just change my circumstances, if I could leave this job, if when the kids are older, if I had more money, I would have freedom. I would just settle down. I'd finally feel X, Y, and Z, peaceful, capable, relaxed. I'd sleep better. And sure, those changes can all help, but they're not the cause. Right? And here's what I've learned after working with thousands of hours of the subconscious mind. You can remove the chaos and still carry a chaotic nervous system. You can leave the stressful relationship and still brace for the next argument. You can retire and still wake up feeling behind. You can finally build the business you've dreamed of and suddenly find yourself creating new problems to solve. Because the environment changed. But your subconscious is still expecting yesterday. And this is really important because I think one of the greatest misunderstandings that we have about healing, especially with women, is that we imagine healing feels immediately peaceful. It doesn't. Not always. Sometimes healing feels strange. Sometimes it feels empty. Sometimes it feels so unfamiliar to us. And that can be really unsettling. Because your subconscious mind has one primary responsibility, And that is not to make you happy, not to help you reach your goals. It does all those things, but its primary responsibility is to keep you alive and to keep you safe. And your subconscious doesn't define safety the way you do consciously. It defines safety as, hear it, familiarity. Your brain likes familiar. I think that's going to be one of the most important things you'll hear today, that your subconscious equates familiar with safe. Not necessarily good, not necessarily even healthy, simply known. So if you've spent 20 years rushing, your nervous system knows rushing. If you've spent 20 years anticipating problems, your nervous system knows anticipation. If you've spent 20 years believing everyone else's needs come before your own, then that's what becomes familiar. It's learned. And because it's familiar and it's compounded, it's repeated, your subconscious continues recreating it. Not because it wants you to suffer, because it's trying to protect you using yesterday's map. Let's call it that. So I will often tell my clients, right, your subconscious is it is a high moral being. It knows you intimately. It knows your values. It loves you so unconditionally, and it is incredibly loyal to you and protective of you, right? It keeps running the program that worked when you were 7. When that part of you, your nervous system, was too young to deal with the circumstances where the pain was, where the fear was, whatever happened. And so it developed this learning and continued to protect you, right? Even though you might be 37 or 47 or 57 now, it doesn't matter, because that program is never outdated, because no one ever told it the danger had passed. So when life finally becomes quiet, something really interesting starts to happen. Your conscious mind says, this is lovely. This is what we've wanted, because there's the analytical part of your brain. Your conscious mind is analytical. So it says, this is wonderful. But your subconscious mind is not analytical. It's primary. And so it whispers, this doesn't feel normal. I don't recognize this. And because it doesn't feel normal, it starts looking for something to do. It starts looking for somewhere to go, something to fix, someone to help. Not necessarily because there's a problem, but because your nervous system has become accustomed to movement, to vigilance, to readiness, to scanning. It's like living beside a train track for years. At first, every train that goes by will startle you. And then eventually you stop noticing them. And now imagine all of a sudden the trains suddenly stop. And the silence itself becomes what feels strange. That's how many women experience peace now. Not as something they've been longing for, but as something their nervous system hasn't yet even learned to trust. And here's something important to recognize, that there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, let's just get that out of the way. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. If you've recognized yourself in these stories today, nothing. Your nervous system isn't broken. In fact, it's incredibly intelligent, and it has simply become exceptionally good at adapting. Why? To keep you alive, to keep you safe. So the question isn't, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? What do I need to do to stop? The question really becomes, what did my nervous system learn was necessary for me to survive? That's the real question. Because once you begin asking that question, everything starts to change. Instead of you judging yourself, you start to become a little more curious. I will do that with my clients a lot. I'll say, what if? What's the big question here? The big question mark. Curiosity instead of judgment. Instead of criticizing yourself for never slowing down, you begin to understand why slowing down has felt so difficult for you. And that understanding is the first layer where we begin to heal it. We begin to heal the pattern first by understanding it. And so the second part of this conversation, I want to take you even deeper. Because once we understand why peace feels unfamiliar to us, we can start to explore how the brain predicts danger before it even exists, and why women often confuse calm with boredom, and what happens inside the subconscious when safety begins replacing survival, and how we gently teach the nervous system that peace isn't something to fear, is something we were always meant to come home to. So, first, are you beginning to recognize yourself in any of this? If so, I'd really love for you to leave a comment and tell me that. And maybe you've started to notice how often you fill in the silence. How you used to be able to just enjoy books, but now you just keep doing other things, picking up your phone. That's what I started to notice with me, especially since the internet and social media. It just trained us to just go to our phone. And before I realized it, that addiction was really, really real, where I would sit to watch a movie, like I had said earlier, and then I'd be picking up my phone in the middle of the movie. I never used to do that. So we start to notice things, how difficult it can feel to just sit, to finish one thing and not get hijacked without immediately starting another, to let there be empty space. Not because you're incapable of resting, but because your nervous system has spent years believing that movement was necessary. So, what if we stopped calling ourselves busy people and instead became curious enough to ask, what has my body been trying to protect me from? And one of the things that's incredible about the human brain is that it's constantly making predictions. In fact, your brain is predicting what's going to happen next every single second of every day. It's part of how it keeps you alive. It remembers patterns. It notices repetition. It builds expectations. If every morning for 20 years you've woken up already bracing, already preparing, already anticipating, your brain begins expecting that rhythm before your feet even touch the floor. Not because it's pessimistic, because prediction is efficient. And the brain loves efficiency. It doesn't want to start from scratch every morning. It's too smart for that. It wants to say, I've seen this before. I know how this works. I already know what to do. And most of the time, that's pretty helpful, right? Until the circumstances begin changing, until you start healing, until the pattern starts shifting, until your life starts to become unfamiliar to it, becomes quieter. But your brain continues predicting chaos. So your schedule becomes lighter, but your nervous system continues preparing for overwhelm. That feels like a conflict internally. Your relationship becomes healthier, but your body's still scanning for disappointment, protecting you. The outside has changed, but the inside hasn't caught up yet. Because you're moving through some of the layers and you're starting to see things are different. And then, before even bigger shifts can take place, your subconscious mind is not on board. It hasn't learned yet. It hasn't caught up yet that you are safe. And you no longer need the same hypervigilance that you have been living for decades. Right? Imagine you lived beside a busy highway for 30 years. Right? Cars and sirens and noise, like New York City noise, right? Movement, day and night. Your brain adapts to it. It learns that constant noise is normal, and it filters out what you don't need to hear. Now, imagine you then move to this quiet little town in the countryside, quiet little cape or cottage. And the first night, it's so quiet. You might hear a few animals in the woods, but it's silent otherwise. You think, oh, this is a dream. But instead of sleeping peacefully, you lie there awake. Something just feels off, right? Not because silence is dangerous, but because your brain hasn't learned that silence belongs here. The nervous system is so similar to this. It doesn't automatically recognize peace just because peace arrives. It has to experience it again and again and again until one day peace becomes familiar. And I think this is where so many women will become discouraged because they'll say, like, I thought I'd be further along by now. I've already done so much work. I've read books and gone to courses. And why do I still feel anxious? Why sometimes does this happen? I mean, I have the life that I wanted. So why do I still feel like something bad is about to happen? And right now, with the leadership and the world and the uncertainty, that's triggering some of these old programs in a lot of women, right? Why do I still feel like something bad is about to happen? And every time you hear something that doesn't quite land well with you, that sets off, it triggers the old programming again. And the answer really to the question is because healing isn't just about changing your circumstances. People will think that a lot. Will think, once I get the goal, right? Once I've changed my circumstances, I'll be happy. I'll be healthy. I'll be whole. I'll feel great. But healing isn't only changing the circumstances. Healing is allowing your nervous system enough repeated experience of safety that it gradually begins to expect safety. And that takes time. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your subconscious learns through constant, consistent, predictable repetition. The same way that it learns survival. It learns safety. I remember working with a woman one time who had spent decades taking care of everyone else around her. It's pretty common with my clients when I think about that. She had been taking care of her children. She'd also taken care of her parents. She had a business. She was responsible for her employees. She was the go-to friend for advice. She was very, very well respected and well loved. And she was a compassionate person, right? She was reliable. She was the one that everyone around her admired. And several months into our work together, she showed up at one of our appointments and she said, I think something strange happened. And so I smiled and I said, well, what happened? And she said, my husband asked me where something was. And instead of immediately getting up to find it, I stayed sitting down. And she laughed. She said, I just pointed. And then she kind of looked at me and started to get emotional. I could tell this was building up. And she said, I didn't even realize that I'd done it. This tiny little moment that most people would never even notice it. But she said, I did. It didn't feel small to me because it wasn't really about finding the something in the kitchen. It was about a nervous system discovering I don't have to leap into action every time someone needs something. That is what I call identity change. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's quiet. It's natural. It's almost ordinary until you realize you've become someone different. And when you do that, it's something you don't ever forget. When a client says to me, for the first time in my life, I drank my morning coffee while it was still hot. I finished my morning coffee without doing 4 other projects, right? Because both she and I knew how important that was, why that mattered, what it meant she wasn't doing, that she wasn't reheating it 3 times anymore. She wasn't carrying it from room to room while solving everyone else's problems. She simply sat and drank her coffee. Sometimes healing looks like that. It's not fireworks. It's not huge breakthroughs every day. Sometimes healing looks like a hot coffee that you finish, a slow walk, an unanswered email that you don't feel guilty about, an afternoon nap that you don't feel guilty about, a weekend that doesn't need to be productive and you don't feel shame about that. You know, watching a film, reading a book, looking out the window without reaching for your phone. Right? The world won't celebrate those moments, but your nervous system will. Because every one of those moments becomes evidence. Evidence that you're safe. Evidence that nothing terrible happened because you rested. Evidence that life continued, even though you paused. This is one of the reasons why I care so deeply about helping women understand the subconscious, their relationship with the divine intelligence that runs them. Because information alone rarely changes these patterns. We don't get there. It's insightful, it's meaningful, it's important, awareness matters, but we don't change the patterns unless we go to where they are programmed and stored. Right? You can read books, you can watch videos, you can understand even neuroscience articles that you read. All of that is valuable, but understanding something consciously isn't the same as your subconscious believing it. Those are two different things. Your subconscious doesn't learn through information. It learns through experience, through repetition, through emotion, through imagery, through the felt sense that something new is now true. And that's, to me, that's why personalized hypnotherapy can be so profoundly different from listening to generic relaxation music or recordings, or even the ones out there that are sort of generalized for everybody. Generic recordings can absolutely help someone relax. And relaxation is wonderful. It's a wonderful resource for the nervous system, but it isn't transformation, right? Let's be clear. So transformation happens when your subconscious begins updating the very rules it has been living by. The rule that says, I have to earn rest. I have to stay busy to be valuable. I have to anticipate everyone's needs. I have to stay prepared. Those aren't personality traits. They're subconscious survival strategies. And survival strategies can be updated. Not by force, not by fighting against yourself, but by giving the subconscious repeated experiences that gently whisper, it is safe now, right? Over and over and over again, until one day your nervous system begins believing it. And if you've listened to my work before, you've probably heard me say something that has become one of the guiding principles of everything that I do. And I say the subconscious is always listening. Always. The question isn't whether it's being programmed. It already is. Every conversation, every news headline, every relationship, every internal dialogue, every moment that you rush, every moment you criticize yourself, every moment you tell yourself, I'll rest later, your subconscious is listening. Always. So imagine what begins changing when instead you intentionally give it experiences of safety, of steadiness, of possibility, of peace. Not once, but consistently. Just as consistently as it once learned survival. Because this is something I think women really need to hear. You're not trying to become a peaceful person. You already are. You already are one. Beneath the conditioning, beneath the hypervigilance, beneath the responsibility, beneath the endless doing, peace isn't something you're chasing. It's something your nervous system is remembering. Because it was there at one point. And then something happened. And it learned it needed to protect you. It needed to keep you safe. So this week, I want to invite you into a tiny experiment. It's not dramatic, it's not complicated. I want you just to choose one moment each day where you intentionally do one thing slowly. Drink your tea, watch the birds outside your window, sit in your garden, take a short walk, fold one towel, not 5 loads of laundry, just one towel. And while you're doing it, notice what your mind wants to do. Does it try to hurry you? Does it start making lists? Does it convince you you're wasting time? Don't argue with it. Just notice. And see if you can just smile when you notice and gently return to the moment you're in. Because every time you do that, you're teaching your nervous system something really important, that this moment is enough, that you're safe, that safety isn't found in constant movement. Sometimes it's found in finally allowing yourself to stop. And I would love you to try it and then come back and comment and let me know how you did. If this episode today really spoke to you, I hope you will share it with another woman who has spent years believing that she has to keep moving in order to be safe, in order to be worthy. Because I promise you, she's out there. She's drinking cold coffee. She's answering emails at stoplights. She's folding laundry while listening to the podcast. She's wondering why she can't seem to relax without realizing there was never anything wrong with her. We have normalized this for women, and I really want to change that. Because women learned survival incredibly well. So now I'd like us to learn something new. And if you're ready to begin that journey yourself, I'd like to invite you to start with the Foundations Library at the website, megadamsonhypnotherapy.com. The very first one, The Lighthouse Within, is completely free. I created it because I believe every woman deserves a place to begin teaching her subconscious what safety actually feels like. And from there, when you're ready, you can continue on to returning to safety and then the inner yes, where we begin gently reshaping those deeper subconscious patterns that keep so many women living in survival mode. You'll find everything you need in the show notes. Thank you, as always, for spending this time with me. It is truly such a pleasure for me and a privilege to be part of your healing journey. So until next time, I want you to remember this. You don't have to earn your peace. You don't have to prove your worth before you're allowed to rest. And you don't have to keep becoming someone else in order to heal. Sometimes the deepest healing begins the moment your nervous system realizes it's finally safe to just simply be. And when that happens, change doesn't become something you have to chase. Change becomes you. Until next month, bye for now.